headquarters there at Graff, they would not have any CDs then.
Oh no, at Gravett they will. Yeah, at Shepherd's Chapel they got lots of them.
They got a whole
Yeah,
library.
their whole library.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I'm just talking about me. I'm the one that doesn't. I just do all my stuff
Yeah.
online. Okay, you guys ready? Okay. Father, we ask that this find people with open eyes and open ears in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, today is Wednesday, August 31st, 2022, and this is my little Bible study. And tonight we're back in the book of Exodus. We're going to pick it up where we left off last week in chapter 2, verse 11, where we got introduced to Moses last night. Now, Moses is getting ready to have a little change of locations. He's going to go from Pharaoh's palace back out into the wilderness where he's going to find his wife. When you start looking at Moses' life is divided up into 3 40-year increments. He does 40 years in Pharaoh's house, he does 40 years with his father-in-law, and then he does 40 years in the wilderness, and then he passes away the day before they go in to the promised land because of mistakes that got made along the way, okay, which we'll cover as we do those particular books and finish the book of Exodus. Now, tonight we're going to pick it up with his second 40 years is where we're getting ready to start focusing on. And it starts with his getting expelled from Egypt. All right, and that starts in chapter 2, verse 11 of the great book of Exodus. And it reads, "And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked upon their burdens." All right, remember last week, the burden level was increasing as he went. When Joseph when they come in to Egypt originally 400 years later, they come in as friends of Pharaoh. All right, but now we're talking about 400 years later, and this is a completely different dynasty, and they don't care who Joseph was. He's just some man that lived a long time ago. All right. Now, Egypt still has the canal that he made, still called the Canal of Joseph, which set up all the stuff that happened in Egypt. All right. But nonetheless, and he spied an Egyptian smiting in Hebrew, one of his brethren. Right? Now he knows this. I made this point last week. Moses is nursed by his mother in Pharaoh's house while he's being raised as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. All right? So his mother's teaching him who he is. His sister's right there teaching him who he is. This man understands who he is, genetically anyway. He understands that he's a Hebrew, not an Egyptian. All right? But he's in a good position. Now think about this. This applies directly to the people in the last days that will testify against the Antichrist. Now you look at this. If you're one of those people that will testify, this is the kind of way that God takes care of these people. All right? Moses, a Hebrew slave, was supposed to die when he was born, yet he ends up the son of Pharaoh's daughter, nursed by his mother, and raised by his sister. And so in the last days, you're in a good position if you're one of those that were chosen to testify. And if you're not, you're still in a good position. All right? If you're not one of those that were chosen before the foundation, you're just fruits of this age, and God is very proud of that. All right? So whether you're elected or if you're called or whether you're chosen, it doesn't matter. The reward is still the same in the end. All right? That's a really important thing to bring up. Because the ones that were chosen from the first heaven and earth age, there's a very small number of those compared to all the rest of mankind.
Is that what Pastor Murray refers to of the world that was?
Yes.
Yeah.
The world that then was, right. It's from 2 Peter chapter 3.
Yeah.
Which next week we might get into that, but that's one of the ones we're going back to pick up is
all.
that one. Right. But nonetheless, he sees an Egyptian man hitting the Hebrew, one of his brethren, so he understands exactly what's going on. Verse 12, "And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in sand." All right. Talk about drawing lines. Moses has drawn some, okay? He doesn't let this slide. It's because he had a compassionate heart. And he understood the burdens had been increased. He understood that Joseph's people were welcome in Egypt and that his people would become slaves over a 400-year period. The first part of the book of Exodus, they're afraid. The Pharaoh's like, "Dah!" There's like 3 or 4 million of them. And they're afraid that if he just joins with any of his enemies, that's enough to topple all of Egypt. So this was a big concern politically, at least I think in Pharaoh's mind. All right, verse 13. "And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strode together. And he said to them that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me, as thou killedest the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known." All right, so he knows the gig's up. He knows he's been spied out. He knows he's going to die if he stays in Egypt. So he has no choice but to go. Now, according Moses doesn't realize, but this is right on God's plan. This is exactly, it's his next 40 years that we begin right at this point. And now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat by a well. Now, it's really important to understand who Midian is. Okay? Because you can get really turned around on the genealogy here. And now, Midian is the son of Abraham and his second wife, Keturah. Okay? After Sarah dies, he takes another wife, Keturah. And Midian is one of those sons that were born from that second marriage, okay? Now, because a lot of people want to try to tell you that Moses married an Egyptian or an Ethiopian or something like that, but no, he married out of his own, out of those tribes. Out of those tribes, but from the long way getting there, it's still out of the Abrahamic seed line.
From
but
what
just
I
came from
understand,
Keturah.
back then they'd kill you.
Yes.
Both of you.
Yes, they did, yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
Stone you.
Now, but nonetheless, Moses is there, so he's there in the land of Midian, and they're at a well. Now, they didn't build this, they didn't dig this well, another group did. So listen to the story that unfolds. And now, the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. So now we're talking about not a location, we're talking about a seed line, the priest of Midian. So we're talking about that direct lineage, all right? Had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. So the owners of the well come. The girls are already there watering their dad's flocks. But they come there, try to kick the girls off who already did all the work just so they can take the water because it is their well. Moses doesn't sit. He just killed an Egyptian over another slave. So he's not going to have a problem standing up here. Now, that just goes to tell you how, I don't know how many that were there, but that takes a little bit of guts. If one person to stand up against a group of shepherds over water, which is something they would have been very familiar about fighting over.
Oh, yeah.
Very much so, right?
And they're hardened. They're shepherds.
That's very much right. And they're shepherds. But nonetheless, Moses runs them off, and the girls get to water their flocks. And when they came to Ruel, their father, he said, "Is this that you were come so soon to the day?" All he's asking them is, "Why are you here so quick?" Now, a lot of people will tell you that Moses' father-in-law's name is Jethro, but Jethro is a title that means Your Excellency. Moses had a lot of respect for his father-in-law, and he often addressed him as Jethro, which is just simply Your Excellency or Sir or Sire or something like that. But his name is Ruel, and that's just for here or there. It's not important really, but just for little fact's sake. And they say in verse 19. And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock." So Moses, he doesn't look Hebrew. He looks Egyptian. She's identified him as Egyptian already. Based upon he's been 40 years in Egypt in Pharaoh's house. He looks like an Egyptian. Talks like an Egyptian. He thinks like an Egyptian.
Smells like an Egyptian.
And Moses is getting ready to get transformed back into what he really is, back into the Hebrew that he really is over the next 40 years. Like I said, God knows exactly what he's doing with people.
And the Hebrew would be in same thing as the Israelite, right?
Yes.
Not a Jew.
No, a Jew is a Hebrew and is an Israelite.
Yeah, it's just another
from
tribe.
Judea, huh?
Yeah.
Just
Jew.
another
When
tribe,
it says
yes.
in the Revelations, they say they are Jews, but they're not. That's what it means. Then. Kind of.
They're talking about Kenites in that. I know where you're quoting from. Coming out of 7 letters. The blasphemy of those that say they're Jews or not, and they're the synagogue of Satan, right?
Two different places it said that.
Yes, it does. In both the churches, it talks
See,
about
what
it.
I think they changed the book. Those who say they're Judean, that's what I think they.
I'd have to look it up. I could find out. I'll find out for sure.
It may not be the word Jew then. It may have been.
I need to give me just a second.
Well, they were claiming to be the tribe of Judah, Judeans. Those who claim to be Judean are not.
That's what he said. They're not.
Right.
Very clear.
Okay, now, verse 20. And they said unto his daughters, "And where is he? Is it that ye have left the man?" And he's confused. He's like, this guy helps you, right? And you just left him somewhere, right? Call him that he may eat bread. Verse 21, and Moses was content to dwell with the man. And he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter, and she bare him a son. And he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. That's what Gershom means, a stranger in a strange land. That finishes, that doesn't finish it there. Let's go on another verse. And it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came upon God by reason of their bondage. All right? So he's heard their affliction. He understands now. By now, the Egyptians, when they went in, they were being protected by the Egyptians. They become slaves, but now they're just being abused. Okay, by this point in the whole story, the Hebrew people are just flat being abused. They were there to be protected, and now they're being abused by Pharaoh, and now it's time for them to go and be their own people in their own land. Now, so God hears their bondage, hears about their bondage. Verse 24, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob. Now, the Abraham covenant is still in full effect to this day. Abraham's children are nations today. All right? And that's the same lineage that Jacob comes through, that Esau comes through. Okay? Two of the biggest players right now in the world right now are both the lost house of Israel, which is the 10 northern tribes, us, the house of Judea, or the Jews in the homeland of Israel. That's what we call them. All right? And then Esau's people are the Russian people. They're the children of Rush, right? All right, so those are big players when you start looking at politics and world events here in the last days. Right now, you got the children of Rush, the Russians. They're dealing heavily in Syria, working with Iran, who have, I don't know how many missiles, they counted them last time, enough that it's going to cause problems if they start shooting them. So all this stuff that we study in the beginning of this book is all still very much in play. Still, it's the same people, it's the same character set as the very beginning. All right?
Yeah, now where are you with the Arabs, some of the Arabs being part of Ishmael?
With the ones that say that if they are Arab and they circumcise, then they are of the tribe of Ishmael.
Because, see, they intermingled with their servants and stuff. That's what I...
Well, that happens with a lot of people. That's not, now with the Hebrews, that's not, you're going to find out in this book, when they go through the Exodus, there's a mixed multitude of people who leave with Israel. All right? It's not just the Hebrew people who leave. They're Egyptians, they're Ethiopians. It's a mixed multitude that leave. God just wants his children back. He doesn't care about any of that. And he's always been that way. If they were willing to convert and follow his law in the Old Testament, they were part of the Hebrew people, even if their physical lineage was considered to be Ethiopian. God is always, that's a bad misconception in modern Christianity, that there was no...
It was a select.
Yeah, that it was select and only Egypt, or only Israel, that any kind of law, or through even salvation through law, or that you get law and sacrifices, or Calvary. But yeah. I want to get on with this because we're going to be here real late if I don't. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Okay, now we're going into chapter 3. Now, we're going to be introduced to the burning bush. I had every intention of getting this all wound up in one day, but there's no way when you start talking about the fire of God that you can do that in 45 minutes. Just no way. There's so much more to it. I've got notes somewhere in a book that I've started on it, and it's going to be, it goes on a while.
I'm sure the discussion is going to be short.
Right, you're right. And it's fun. It's good stuff. It really is. And so I'm going to add it to that. Tonight, we're just going to talk about, when we talk about the burning bush, we're just going to talk about it in kind of a general term, and I'm going to look at some stuff involved in that, and then be looking for a BV coming out on that called the Fire of God, because it's going to be a real good one, I think. Now, Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro. Now Jethro means your excellency. His father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he let the flock, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert, and he came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. Verse 2. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. All right? And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, but the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside to see this great sight while this bush is not burned. All right, so that gets Moses' attention. Now, he's seen plenty of things burn in the desert in his life, right? As an Egyptian, now it's 40 more years. So he's seen some things burn. But this is strange. It's a type of fire that doesn't consume the bush. All right. Now, this fire has two sides to it. You can have the non-consuming fire, or you can have the consuming fire, all right? It's the same fire, though. You understand what I'm getting at here? The same fire that warms your heart as part of the Holy Spirit, all right, is the same fire that can destroy your soul in the lake of fire. You follow what I'm saying? Okay. Now we're going to look at just one case other than this burning bush, and it's in the book of Daniel. Now, hold on.
Can I say something in
Yes, sir.
regard to the burning bush?
Uh-huh.
The burning bush was really a color of a leaf. And because the bush, when you say a burning bush, it's a wingleaf euonymus. Have you ever heard of that plant?
Nope.
All right. Well, they turn red, bright red in the fall after the first frost. So I really think, it's me,
I got you.
I think this thing wasn't on fire at all.
Yeah.
I think it was just a red bush.
See,
Somebody
I think it was on fire.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with what's
Yeah.
been shown in
Right, like we've studied a little bit about
yeah.
God and His appearance and
he
and
wants his
things
presence
like that.
known. There's
Yeah.
no joke about it. He's
Yeah.
not afraid to show who he is.
That's
what I think
right.
now
And
with
the bush. The reason why I don't agree with that is because what we're going to study here in chapter 3 of Daniel. All right. Now, we just finished the book of Revelation. You're going to be familiar with some of this, and we've never read this chapter, all right? But you're going to hear the same words that you've heard from Luke, that you heard in the book of Revelation. You're going to hear it all repeated again, all right? And like I said, the book of Daniel is an overlay for the book of Revelation. You get the same subject matter, but you just get a little different look at it, all right? And I think Daniel many times is easier to understand than the book of Revelation sometimes, just because of the way it's written, especially the first few chapters of it, which are really, really interesting. And one of those first few chapters is here in chapter 3. Now listen to what it says. We're talking 3 verse 1, and we're on the non-consuming fire is what we're talking about. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth 6 cubits, and he set it upon the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. All right, so that's 90 feet by 9. That's big. All right. Now this is this image you will see a lot of places later in visions in Daniel. We just studied the book of Revelation. You got the first beast of the book of Revelation is a political beast, and when one of those heads is destroyed, the Antichrist appears and heals that deadly wound. Right? Well, he makes an image of the first beast, which is the political system, and causes people to worship it. Well, this is exactly the same thing. And just keep that thought as we're going through it. Verse 2, and Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, the rulers of the province to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And that is a lot harder to read than you would think. All right. So we have the whole setup then, all right? Just like when the Antichrist appears, he's going to have what? All right, listen to what it says in the next one. It'll clarify. You'll go, oh, yeah. Then the princes and the governors and the captains and judges and the treasurers and the counselors and the sheriffs and the rulers in the province were gathered together unto the dedication of the image Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image of Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, but with tongues.
Yeah, tongues.
Exactly exactly like the setup for the book of Revelation. All right. Verse 5. That at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the peace psaltery, and the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye shall fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. So he got a direct order to them by Nebuchadnezzar. What happens if you defy the king of Babylon? Yeah, exactly, you're done. All right? Now, once Nebuchadnezzar makes this decree, it doesn't matter how he personally feels about it. It has to be carried out. All right? Now, there's a lot of stuff about Nebuchadnezzar, right? Now, the Bible says Nebuchadnezzar was a faithful servant of God. All right, just flat out calls him that. And the reason why is so we could get this. So we could get this. Us, me, you, me, all you. So we could get the book of Daniel today. All right, that's why all that went down. Now, so we have the exact setup. We have the Antichrist on the book of Revelation. It's the exact setup you see here. Everybody's having to do the same thing. Worship the Antichrist. You get your bills paid. You get your front teeth paid. You get whatever paid. You get your health care paid. You get your check at the end of the month. All right. You get your retirement. All right. Now, when the Antichrist appears, you have to preach against prosperity. You have to stand up and say, no. All right. This is not it. And that's going to be hard to do. All right, because he's going to want a chicken in every pot. That's what he says. How does the book of Daniel says it in the 70th week that he comes midweek and he deceives the people with peace and prosperity. That's the deception at the last days. And we've got to watch clearly for it. Verse 6. And whosoever not fall down and worship, say the same hour, be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And I'm sure when Antichrist is here, he's going to be threatening you with death. Going to cut your head off. But what does it say? And he can't kill anybody. That's right. If he kills anybody, he can't be Jesus. All right? He's Antichrist. Right. So that it's over. That's right. As soon as he kills the two prophets, that's right. It's over then.
It's done.
All right. Everything's over at that point. Right. Now, that sounds fun. This should be something that you actually want to be involved in. All right. Man, a lot of people are praying that they'll just fly away. But I don't know. You sit here in the days that we live. Jeremiah and all the Old Testament prophets, they wanted to live the same time that we live. All right?
Yeah.
They had a great role that they played, but they wanted to be here for this.
During the show, yeah.
That's right. And instead of sending Jeremiah or instead of sending Daniel or Ezekiel or Job, he sent you. He sent you and you and you and me. All right? Now, if you don't, that puts you in a swell place if you're aware of what's going on. All right? Now, I don't stick my foot out prophetically with too much. I teach what I know, and I kind of let it go at that. But the first beast of the book of Revelation is a political beast. It's 7 nations that bind together to attempt to bring peace to the world. All right? And right now, we've got 2 or 3 groups of 7 nations that have the ability to do that exact thing. Now, you got to remember, the first political beast, the one that just before the Antichrist shows up, is pretty weak. All right? And when one hen is wounded, it brings the whole thing down. And that's what the Antichrist cures. That's the deadly wound that he heals.
Claims.
No, that's right. And then he claims to be Jesus.
The
term Antichrist means instead of Jesus. That's what Antichrist means. All right? Now, let's get back into Daniel. I guess I got on a sidetrack. It happens with me sometimes. All right. Verse 7, therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the peace psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. All right, there's the Antichrist. You could actually insert that probably in there and get away with it. All right. Now, here we come then to the fire. So let's see talk about the non-consuming fire. Verse 8, wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. Verse 9, and they spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. That's just buttering him up. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, if you've read Daniel, you can figure out that Nebuchadnezzar gets wise to these people real quick. All right, and he sets up a little condition that's going to get them all killed except for Daniel. And it's because Nebuchadnezzar is smart. He understands what's going on. You don't get to be the king of Babylon in the real world without being a pretty sad character in the real life, is what I'm getting at. All right. And I think it just displays how smart he was with the way he sets this all up in another chapter. But nonetheless, verse 11. And whosoever fall not down in worship, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these guys were doing pretty good. They'd done exactly what God had said, and he said, just go to Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar shows up and he says, I want all your princes, I want the smart ones, the ones that are good with math, the ones that are good with science. He wants to take them to Babylon. Babylon had the biggest library in antiquity. I mean, it was huge. It was well known. And that was all at their disposal. But when you start studying this book, you find out these boys didn't rebel against that. They did their homework. All right? Daniel learns Chaldeans, Shadrach, Meshach, all of them. They're so good that they're elevated even in Babylon. And God tells them that if you go, you're going to have no problems. All right?
Live nice.
Right. You're going to live good. Right. And so these boys did. And then you find them, they're ruling part of the province, or even as a captured people. And these men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship thy golden image which thou hast set up. All right, that's just where they draw the line. They can't do it. They won't do it. All right, just like in the last days when you got the Antichrist before you, no matter how powerful he appears, you don't want to worship him. If you don't worship him, he can't touch you anyway. What does Luke say about it? He said, not one hair on your head will be touched. All right, but what we have is a popular doctrine about an Antichrist showing up with a tail, some horns, and a pitchfork, right, cutting people's heads off, burning people alive, basic rats and poison kind of an idea.
Name the morning star because he was beautiful.
Because he was beautiful, right, and people forget that. And it's because of what's taught. But nonetheless, verse 13, then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. How dare them, huh? And they brought these men before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do ye serve my gods nor worship, or do ye not serve my gods nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Neither, if you be ready, at what time you heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the peace psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, that you fall down and worship the image which I made. Well, but if you worship not, you shall be cast in that same hour, into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is it that God that should deliver you out of my hands? So Nebuchadnezzar just flat putting it down. Who do you think you are, you little runs? Right. Who do you defy me? They did, though. All right. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. What he just said, so I'm not going to cut any words with you. I'm going to tell you straight.
It's done, yeah.
That's right. Now, that's a lesson to be learned about future events. But you want to learn how to handle the dragon, there it is. Right in front of you. The example is given. All right. Verse 17. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. So they have quite the confidence in God. All right. Even being there, because they did exactly what he said to do. Went to Babylon. Their princes, they're put over magistrates and as part of the provinces of Babylon. They've done real good. They have no reason. God has never failed them. Everything he said has came to pass exactly as it said. All right. And so they have.
Why would they have anything?
So why would they have anything? God, that's right. That's right. Now think about that group out of the book of Numbers, right? They start out after this book in Exodus. Well, the next one's Numbers. That's in the Midbar. That's in they're in the wilderness there. All right. And, let's not get into that. Well, here I'll go. It'll be an hour, and I'll still be talking about what's going on in the book of Numbers. All right. But 18. But if not, be it known to thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods. All right. Hear what he said? He said, even if we die. All right. He's willing to. He said, even if we die, we will not serve your gods. So, it's not going to be required. But what I want to have in your mind is that they're willing, that they are actually willing to put it down when it comes down to it. All right. where are we now? Verse 18? Oh, no, that's verse 19. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his vesture was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace over 7 times more than it was to be heated. Okay, so 7, that's our number, right? Spiritual completeness.
Wow.
Yeah, that's our
a
number.
horrible number to choose there. Well, but he's
That's a good one,
serving
though.
God.
All right,
Yeah,
he's serving God. Right, 7 times
All in
harder.
play. Wow,
Right,
what a
it's
trip.
all in play. I love the American University
Yeah,
School.
what a trip,
Yeah, it's not anything to be its own religion. It's just a part of the overall scope of
the overall
things.
scope of
So,
things,
right, right. Verse 20, and he commanded the most mighty men that they were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. 21. Then these men were bound in their coats, and their hosen, and their hats, and their outer garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. 22. Therefore, because of the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace was exceedingly hot, the flames of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All right? So these men, just like Moses, these guys, they're in a good spot. All right? 23. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astounded, and rose up in haste, and spake and said to his counselors, all right, did not we cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, true, O king. 25. And he answered and said, lo, look, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Okay. So here we go. It's spiritual, right.
Yeah,
just like Moses' bush, this fire now is God's fire.
Yep.
Now, what's the last verse of Hebrews chapter 12 tell you? That God is a consuming fire. Okay? Now, that's a very important thing, and that's what our next BV, when we go back to doing this, is actually going to be about. It's going to be about the consuming fire part. All right? Because this is just about those parts that doesn't. And that's the important part to us. Because if you don't bear the mark of the beast when the Antichrist appears, at that point, you will have in no danger of the second death. And that's a big deal, because that means you spiritually go into the millennium clean. And that's a good place to be, because that means you work in the temple. You're not those that are kept outside of the temple. You'll have opportunity then. So imagine how many people that you talk to in your life. Friends, not just friends, but family sometimes. And you get kind of a cold shoulder when you start talking about stuff sometimes. You really do. And that's just part of it. But imagine, though, during the time, if they see you delivered up and see the things that happen and that you speak, no matter how they feel about you personally, we talked about this a little bit last time, that no matter how they feel about you, even if they don't like you, your testimony then will carry weight. It carries a lot of weight. And it even says that he'll give you a tongue. God will put it in your mouth, wisdom, and give you a tongue that will convince and change the mind of even the gainsayers that speak against you. So there's nothing bad about any of that. And that is also a part of this fire. It's part of the non-consuming one. Just a little bit of the 2 prophets of the book of Revelations. How do they kill people that stand against them? Fire that proceeds out of their mouth, right? The truth that comes out of their mouth. So there's a lot to the fire of God. This one is this one. Now listen to what we're just about done. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. And the province, and the princes, and the governors, and the captains, and the kings, and the counselors began gathering together, and saw these men, upon whom the bodies of the fire had no power, nor was any hair on their heads singed. Right? Just like Luke says, right? Nor, neither were their clothes changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. You couldn't even smell smoke on these boys.
Everything smelled of smoke.
All right, but yet they were in the fire.
Yeah.
All right, but it was because it was that
You were in the damn
fire. That's that fire that doesn't burn. All right, that warms your heart and the Holy Spirit. That even in the midst of Babylon, in front of Nebuchadnezzar, keeps these boys safe, simply because they're faithful and they were willing to go down. He even told them, even if he doesn't save us, we're still not going to do
we're
it.
still not gonna do it.
All right, that is putting your foot down when it counts. All right, and that'll be up to each one of us if you're chosen. I really don't think I'm one of them. I really don't. But I'd love to be. That would be cool. But I'm just thinking I'm a product of this age. I sat down and I started to learn, and I found out some truths, and that's where Arnold helped me.
Now do you
Well, the
know?
first thing he told me when I started studying with him was, "Don't believe a word I say." He said, "Don't believe
Find out
one
for
word
yourself.
I say." That's right. Find out for yourself. And then he goes, "I'll teach you how to do it." And that's what he did. And that's why I do what I do today. All right, for those very same things. Listen to what it says, though. I want to finish this up because this ain't quite over. 28, then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has set his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies that they may not serve nor worship any god except their own." 29, therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their house shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. All right? And that's exactly what people will say at the first day of the millennium. Exactly that same kind of thing. Verse 30. And we'll be done for today. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. All right, so after all that's done, just like Moses, they're better off than when they started. All right? Yeah, go ahead. And that's everything tonight then. That's where we're going to stop tonight. All right? Next week, though, we're going to go... Let me stop this.